I ignore my avoidant ex for 6 months. Here's what finally broke them. You're doing this wrong if you think 6 months of silence is just a longer version of 90 days. For 6 months, I didn't text. I didn't check their stories. I didn't react. And something unexpected happened. They broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but they broke. And what caused it wasn't what most people think. It wasn't the silence itself. It was something that happened inside me during that silence. Something they could feel even without a single word exchange between us. Most people go no contact, expecting a clean outcome. Either their ex comes back or they move on. But with an avoidant, neither of those things happens on a normal timeline. Avoidants are wired differently. From childhood, they learned that needing people was dangerous, that getting too close meant getting hurt. So they build a system, a reliable internal loop where distance creates safety, and emotional pursuit from others creates reassurance. They pull back, you chase, they feel wanted without having to be vulnerable. The cycle resets. They were waiting for me to play my part in that loop. They were waiting for the late-night message, the "I miss you" paragraph, the emotional relapse that would tell them they still had me. It never came. The first 2 months didn't scare them. That's the part nobody tells you. And it matters because if you quit during this phase thinking it isn't working, you'll never see what comes after. In month 1, the silence actually felt good to them. Distance is an avoidance comfort zone. When the pressure of the relationship disappeared, their nervous system exhaled. They filled the space immediately. Friends, work, the gym, maybe a dating app back on their phone. They look completely fine, unbothered, free. And you, on the other side of that silence, were falling apart wondering how someone could feel nothing while you felt everything. But here's what was actually happening underneath their calm exterior. They weren't at peace. They were running. Every plan they made, every distraction they filled their days with, was a wall between themselves and the quiet, because quiet meant feeling, and feeling was the one thing their entire psychology was built to avoid. Month 2 brought the first cracks. The adrenaline of newfound freedom started wearing off. The social calendar stopped working as well. They would reach for their phone out of habit and remember, see something that reminded them of you, and have nowhere to put that feeling. The distraction stopped being enough. But they weren't ready to admit that yet. So they did the only thing available to them. They started watching. Month 3 was when something subtle but significant shifted. They checked my profile. Quietly. No likes. No comments. No interaction. Just monitoring. This is a behavior most people misread as indifference, but it's actually the opposite. An avoidant who has truly moved on doesn't check. Checking means they're measuring. They're looking for evidence that you're not okay, because your pain is the thing that keeps them feeling relevant. If you're sad, if you're posting nostalgic things, if you look like you're waiting, their nervous system relaxes. You're still in orbit around them. But I wasn't posting that. I was just living. And that was the first thing that unsettled them. Month 4 pushed that unsettlement deeper. This is where avoidants are forced to do something they almost never do voluntarily. Look inward. With the distraction phase over and the monitoring phase producing confusing results, they start replaying the relationship without the defensive filter they usually rely on. They remember the real version of things. Not the story they told themselves about why it ended, but the actual moments, the way you knew them, the way you never made them perform, the way your presence was the safest thing they had, and they dismantled it anyway. Some avoidants start connecting dots during this phase. They look at their relationship history and see the same ending written over and over in different handwriting. They realize the common factor. Others refuse to go there. They rewrite the story instead, decide it was incompatibility, tell themselves the next person will just naturally understand their need for space. But even the ones who rewrite it can't fully silence what month 4 is asking them to face. Month 5 was a real turning point. Not for them, for me. And that shift in me is what actually broke them. By month 5, the silence wasn't a weapon anymore. It was just my environment. I wasn't holding my breath to see if they'd notice. I wasn't performing strength. I wasn't secretly counting the days and hoping the universe would reward my patience. I was just breathing. And that's the exact frequency avoidants are terrified of, The sound of someone who no longer needs them to be okay, because their entire attachment system is built on a hidden assumption that you are out there somewhere still emotionally tethered to them, still affected, still waiting at some level, even if you're not showing it. That assumption is what gives them the safety to stay distant. The moment that assumption breaks, everything shifts. I had stopped checking their profile entirely. I had rebuilt routines that had nothing to do with them. I had conversations that reminded me who I was outside of the relationship. I had started to feel genuinely like myself again. And without sending a single message or making a single move, they felt it. The quality of my silence had changed in a way words never could have communicated. What broke them wasn't my absence. It was realizing I wasn't emotionally available anymore. I wasn't triggered. I wasn't watching for signs. I wasn't running my day around whether they might reach out. I had become irrelevant to my own pain around them. And that is the specific thing avoidance cannot tolerate. They are terrified of being needed too much. That's the fear everyone knows about. But they are equally terrified of becoming irrelevant. When you stop revolving around them, they lose the thing their attachment system secretly depends on, knowing that somewhere, someone is still waiting. When I stopped being emotionally available without making any announcement about it, that was the power shift they never saw coming. Month 6 arrived, and so did the message. Not dramatic, not desperate, not the paragraph full of apologies I might have imagined back in month 1. Just, hey, I've been thinking about you. Calm, casual, controlled on the surface. But I knew what it meant. Avoidants don't reach out without weeks of internal debate first. That message was a visible tip of something that had been building underneath for months. The phrasing was careful because they were still protecting themselves, still leaving room to retreat if I responded badly. But they sent it, and for an avoidant, sending it all is the equivalent of someone else showing up at your door. It signals that their internal anxiety finally outweighed their internal defense system. The silence had crossed a threshold they didn't know existed until it was crossed. What actually broke them wasn't no contact. That's the thing I want you to understand clearly. Plenty of people do no contact, and it changes nothing. The avoidant waits them out, or eventually moves on without much disruption. What broke mine was emotional detachment. The real kind, not performed detachment, where you're secretly counting the days and hoping they notice. Actual internal detachment, where you stop needing closure, stop needing answers, stop needing them to finally understand what they lost. Avoidance can feel the difference between someone who is silent and someone who has genuinely moved their emotional center of gravity. One is a strategy. The other is a transformation. I transformed, and they felt it before they could explain it. When I stopped fighting for connection, they felt the loss in a way that my actual presence never created. Not because I disappeared, but because I stopped revolving around them. I stopped being the emotional constant they could ignore, but always count on. The moment I became someone who was simply living their own life without reference to them, I became someone they had actually lost. And losing me, the real version of losing me, not the temporary distance they were used to managing, that was the thing their system had never learned how to handle. 6 months of silence doesn't guarantee this outcome. What guarantees it is what you do inside the silence. Whether you use that time to actually rebuild yourself or just wait in a different position, the avoidant will always feel the difference. And the version of you that is genuinely healed, genuinely moved on internally, genuinely stopped needing to come back in order to feel whole, that version of you is the only one that creates the shift that 6 months created in me. You were never broken for loving someone who couldn't love you back the same way. You were just giving everything to someone who hadn't learned how to receive it. And the moment you stopped, they finally understood what they had been given all along.